Good evening, everyone. I am Chandoo from the 103.1 FM newsroom, and we are getting ready for the start of our post-budget analysis, where we take a look at the just concluded 2024 national budget. I have with me Mr. Arun Seenath, a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago. Just checking that he is live with us now. Good evening, Mr. Seenath.
Evening, Sarah. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We had a slight delay. I apologize due to a few minor technical issues, but very much glad, of course, that you could join us here this evening. So I do have a little bit of information for our listeners on just who Mr. Arun Seenath is. So you are a practicing member of ICAT. You're a partner at Deloitte and Touche, and you lead the Taxation and Business Process Services Department at that firm. 20 years of experience in public accounting, and you've also done work in the areas of audit and assurance, information technology, and risk advisory for several local and multinational companies in different industries. Your focus within the area of tax encompasses international consulting, tax planning, due diligence, mergers and acquisitions, and international assignee services. And of course, you also work with a number of volunteer organizations throughout the country. And ICAT itself, the organization, contributes to the national discussion on issues of finance. And your input as a regulator is sought to advise matters of taxation, legislation, and the development of the annual national budget. So, Mr. Seenath, let's start. A lot to take in from the presentation this evening, almost 4 hours or about 4 hours long from the Finance Minister. So we do have a few important things to touch on, but let's start with your initial impression of the package delivered by the Finance Minister this evening.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be on. I mean, I looked at the entire presentation, every word of it, and I thought that the minister spent a lot of time speaking about the different policies that the government will be working on, and not much time on the measures that will be required to get the government there. I know the minister did a fair bit of work because this will be the 8th year that this current government is in government, and they've done a fair bit of work over those 8 years in terms of the fiscal measures they've put in place and in terms of the different items in terms of revenue generation. So I expected that this presentation would not have dealt with a lot more than we saw, but I didn't expect seven. I think I counted 7 fiscal measures. So I think it's the least that we've had since the minister has taken charge of the Ministry of Finance. But it sends a message that the minister is confident of his policies that he's put in place over the last 8 years to deal with the issues that they'll be dealing with.
Well, I took note of the economic situation that he presented. So he says that economic activity has rebounded given the impact of COVID. He said that a lot of the factors that would have impacted TNT's economy in the past were outside of our control, but he says that it is time to move forward, and he is very optimistic about what the future holds. He says that inflation is projected to go down in the next couple of years, and that the economic growth rate is going to go up as well. Are you satisfied with his assessment currently and also of the economy moving forward?
I think since the minister took charge of the ministry, he's had a very turbulent time in that ministry with the shocks in oil prices when they just went into government, and COVID-19, having to deal with COVID-19 for 3 years. I think when you look at Trinidad in comparison to its nearest neighbors in the Caribbean, we're doing fairly okay compared to everyone else. When you look at the state of our foreign reserves, our import cover, in terms of unemployment, I think when you compare us to the rest of the region, we seem to be doing comparatively well. Also, when you expand that comparison to Latin America, I think Trinidad is actually doing fairly well as it's compared in the entire Western Hemisphere. There are a few countries economically that are doing much better than us. I think our nearest neighbor being Ghana. But I think generally Trinidad has done a fairly good job. I always say hats off to the minister because it's been a difficult time. I know he comes under criticism several times, and I definitely understand where that criticism comes from. But I think when he deserves kudos, I think you need to give it to him, and I think in the current circumstances, Trinidad could have been in a much worse situation than it currently is.
I took note of one thing in particular as well. So he said that the energy sector is going to remain a primary growth engine in the near to medium term. So in budgets past, we've constantly heard the term diversification. We did not really hear it. I don't think we heard it at all in this presentation. And that obviously is supposed to be a long-term goal. So do you think in the other measures he and assessments he did for other sectors such as agriculture, do you think diversification as an issue was addressed in any way indirectly in those measures?
Well, I think in terms of diversification, again, it's something that he's mentioned in previous budgets, and he didn't specifically mention in this one. But when you look at the revenue, the expected revenue for the fiscal 24, you look at oil and gas being, I think, 16.7 billion, and you're looking at non-oil being 35 billion. So that suggests that the non-oil sectors are actually bringing in much more revenue than the oil and gas sectors. Now, how economics works, it's those things are definitely connected to each other. So like the banking sector, they would have a lot of clients in the oil and gas sector, in terms of lending and various things. So it's all connected. But I think it suggests that in the non-oil sector, there's a fair bit of revenue generation. So it suggests that there's some level of diversification in terms of the makeup of our economy, although he didn't specifically mention it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Seenath, for that. So I want to I think person's attention may have been caught during the budget by the main announcement, one of the major announcements made. So we could jump to that and then work our way down the list of issues that I have. Hopefully we could discuss as many as possible. So I think you already know what that is. It's the minimum wage increase that he announced. So he proposed an increase of 17% or $3 per hour. So the minimum wage, following amendments to the Minimum Wages Act and effective from January 1st, 2024, will go from $17.50 per hour to $20.50 per hour. So I know murmurings of this were put out in the public domain over the weekend, so some people actually expected it. What is your take on that? And I mean, obviously an increase in minimum wage is going to mean more money being put out by employers. Do you expect any sort of ripple effects as well?
I think in that, for minimum wage earners, I think there are a lot of companies that pay much more than minimum wage. So when you look at that jump from $17.50 to $20.50, I think when you look at maybe retail and other industries that, when you poll them, you actually get those companies indicating that they pay much more than minimum wage. So I'm not too sure who this is going to affect directly. But I know in terms of information, so the minister would have direct information from different industries that would have directed this measure and indicated that it would cost a certain amount. But I think that I don't see it significantly affecting the price of goods and services. I know that maybe some small stores in the various cities and boroughs, they would be paying minimum wage, but I don't know how much volume of workers will be affected. I think it's still a good step because if there are people who are being paid minimum wage, they will be taking home close to additional $500 a month. So that definitely helps, and as well as the other measures the minister mentioned in terms of different grants for school supplies and different things will definitely help various families. But I think that I'm not too sure that you will see a ripple effect in terms of prices.
And just to touch on that grant that Mr. Seenath mentioned just now, the minister said that there would be an assistance grant for students in primary and secondary schools subject to a means test of $1,000 to assist with school supplies. And also, I think he said that there were going to be discussions with stakeholders with regard to standardizing textbooks to ensure that textbooks could be passed down in that way, in a small way, to minimize students having to pick up new textbooks all the time, so they aren't able to pass it down to their siblings and so on, cousins and that sort of thing. He said that was a constant source of headache for parents. Basically, they can't get second-hand books as easily. I wanted to talk as well about the back pay promise that the minister made. So not only did he say that he was allocating over $1 billion to clear up the back pay for those workers who would have settled, he also set a goal of Christmas 2023 to have all that money paid. Do you think that's achievable?
Yes, so I think out of everything that the minister said in the entire budget, that $1 billion in back pay is the most significant item. The reason I say that is because once you pay that back pay, you put money in the hands of a lot of people, and that money will then drive consumerism. So I guess the objective as well is to make sure it happens before Christmas, so that you will see an uptick during Christmas in sales for various companies in the retail industry. So, you might see people spending on construction projects. Like if you're looking to fix up your home and you didn't have the available cash before, if you get some back paid, and you could use that to do those things, it will drive employment at a certain level as well. So I think out of everything that's said, that is to me one of the most significant items, and I think it will drive a lot of activity over the next. If they manage to pay that in Christmas, that will drive a lot of activity over the next 4 or 5 months into 2024.
But do you think they would be able to do that? Because we've heard stories years and years, over the years, about government workers simply waiting for their back pay. I know of several government workers still awaiting back pay. So that's a pretty short period of time. It's basically October, November, December to get all that in place.
Yeah. So what's involved normally in that process is that there are calculations that have to be done, and then there are verification to those calculations that will be done as well. So we've actually been part of various projects as it relates to the verification of that back pay process, and if it goes well, it can happen within 2 to 3 months. What can cause that to be delayed would be the state of records. And the quality of records that actually go into the calculation. So the fact that there hasn't been significant back pay payments being made over the last, I think, 5 years, it could have affected HR files. HR files might not have been in proper order because there hasn't been any real drive to have those in order. But this will require them now to be in good order. And if those items are not in proper order, I think it could cause delays in the back pay process. But I think generally they should be able to achieve that within that 2 to 3 month window.
Mm-hmm. And well, of course, NIS is also an issue. We've been hearing a lot in the past few months as well about the issues being experienced in that realm. So during the budget, Mr. Imbert said, quote, "We are not convinced at this time that we should increase the rate of contributions by employers and employees. We consider a higher retirement age broadly appropriate." And he said as well that end quote there. He said as well that they found through assessment that an increase in the retirement age from 60 to 65 will support pension adequacy. So we know as well that they have been exploring that particular measure. What are your thoughts on that whole issue with NIS and the retirement age?
Yeah, so my view on the NIS, with regards to the retirement age, I think it's something to look at. I don't know, how you convince people more to work from 60 to 65. I think if people had the opportunity to retire, they'd retire at 50. But so I think that's one of the challenges that the government will face when they're doing that consultation. But I think the system isn't capturing a lot that needs to be captured. So what has happened in the last decade, I think that Trinidadians have moved to more of an entrepreneurship kind of nature. So what happens is that if you're a sole proprietor or you're a business person who's not an employee of a company, there isn't a real system whereby you can continue to contribute towards the NIB. So I think if they develop and they roll out a system where you can capture sole proprietors to make contributions towards the NIS scheme, I think definitely it will help the fund, and maybe not look at moving the retirement age from 60 to 65, but maybe take it up a year or two. So that might be something they can look at as well. But I think one of the major drivers is that apart from the rate of death and the rate of birth, I think the capturing of sole proprietors into this scheme is something that needs to be looked at.
Mm-hmm. So I was wondering why the general gap that they've considered here, 60 to 65. I know in countries like Barbados and France, they did like a year or two on. You said a year or two is ideal for you with regard to any proposed increase to the retirement age.
No. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that instead of looking at a whole 5-year adjustment, maybe they can look at a year or two. I think that will be more palatable.
Right.
Because what happens is that when you reach retirement age, a lot of people don't have plans in place, and you find that people still desire to work just to bring in additional income. So maybe retirement, pension from NIS may not be sufficient to deal with their current lifestyle. So some people prefer to work. So I think if there's an ability to move that retirement age up without taking it to 65, I think people might be more amenable to that. But you've seen in the other countries as well, there's been a fair bit of pushback in terms of taking that retirement age up to 65. So I expect similar to happen in Trinidad, but I think one of the major things they need to look at is getting persons registered who are not currently captured by the scheme, and I think that will definitely help them.
Yes, thank you for clearing that up, my understanding as well. So I'm sorry to be flipping through the topics so quickly. We barely had time to prepare for this following the budget presentation. So from here, we go to another major issue I know people would have been looking out for, and that is the property tax. So we've been hearing that the property tax is coming for quite a while. So the minister in his presentation said that collection will be effective in the 2024 financial year. This is for residential customers, though, residential properties. And he said that upon proclamation and operationalization of the relevant local government legislation, the taxes will be collected by the municipal corporations. So property tax, it's been a point of contention for so long. The UNC still maintains that if it comes into government, it will scrap the property tax. What are your thoughts on the property tax, as well as this seeming confirmation from the minister that it's going to be implemented in 2024, finally, after hearing for so long that the property tax is coming?
Yeah, so there's never a good time to introduce a new tax. So I think that would definitely, aggravate the masses. But I think in terms of the minister as well, he's always, I think since they came into government, he's always mentioned this property tax. And I think every year he's indicated that expect the property tax to be collected. I think we expected it to be collected during the end of 2023. I think that was mentioned in the last budget, and he's saying that in 2024. So I don't know how that's going to play out, because what happens is that in 2024 we're going to have 1 year to an election. So I don't know if the minister might just say, look, let's just leave it to 2025 after the election and see how that goes. But in terms of the calculation, I think so how the minister spelled it out is that you essentially pay $27 per month in property tax for every $1,000 that you can rent your property for. So, for example, if you can rent your property for $2,000 a month, you pay $54 in property tax. If you can rent it for $3,000, you pay $81, and it increases by $27 for every $1,000 you can rent your property. I think one of the challenges that the minister will have is that, so for example, on my street, there are various types of properties. So, one property might have 2 bedrooms, one property might have 3, one property might have 4 bedrooms, and those properties might be able to be rented for different values. But I'm not too sure how the minister and his team is going about differentiating in those values, let's say in a given street or a given area. So I don't know if they'll have a generalized property value, rental value for a general area and say, look, okay, in Piaco you can rent properties for, let's say, $3,000, but it will vary. So I sense that there will be a lot of pushback from property owners if they're dissatisfied with the amount. Some property owners might say, look, I think the assessment is fine. I can live with that. I'll pay the property tax, and the minister will drive revenue collection. But I think there will be challenges along the way, and that can definitely tie up the process in terms of objections to property tax and tax appeals. It could even affect the legal system if persons go to court of appeal, etc. So I think that is something that could also affect the implementation of the tax and the operationalization of it.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned it in relation to the upcoming general election as well, because towards the very end of the budget, the minister made it a point to say this particular statement. He said, we've taken a deliberate decision not to increase or reduce any existing taxes in 2024. So even when he presented that measure about the property tax, he mentioned that it was not a new tax. And that's always been the government's stance on it. And he said, aside from some positive adjustments to the tax regime in the energy sector to stimulate exploration and production, like I said, no increase or reduction in any existing taxes in 2024. So you could assume that the minister definitely has that upcoming election in mind, because I thought it interesting that he took the time to mention that. So from here, we could go to another major issue, and I know a lot of business persons, especially SMEs, would have been awaiting to hear what the minister had to say with regard to Forex. So that Forex issue, definitely a headline story for multiple months now. So it came to a head recently when the minister had a meeting, I think, with the Banking Association as well as the Chamber of Industry and Commerce regarding access to Forex. So the minister said in the budget today a new arrangement is going to be created in 2024 for preferential access to foreign exchange for qualified small and medium enterprises, and he says he's already received recommendations from the Chamber, commercial banks and the Exim Bank. And he also said they're going to set an agenda to determine the causes and effects of increased demand for Forex. Do you think his measures or what he said with regard to Forex is enough to satisfy those who are being affected by this particular issue?
I don't think so. I think there will continue to be challenges with regards to Forex. So, but what the minister is mentioning is a kind of very smart way of ensuring that, when there's demands for Forex, let's say you tie it into a company's tax returns, for example, and if they're demanding Forex for $500,000 in purchases, and they're selling $200,000, then something doesn't tie back. So I think that will be a tie in terms of making sure that companies that fall into the qualified category actually pass that test. So, but I think there will always be a demand for Forex, even as it relates to individuals, small entrepreneurs who do different types of businesses. So, or even persons with who's doing shopping to try and save money from a retail standpoint. So I think the demands on Forex will always be there. When you look at various industries, it seems like they have no issues in obtaining Forex. You see new cars on the road regularly. So those things the population asks if it makes sense that the allocation varies substantially to different industries, but the small businessman is not able to get his Forex to engage in trade. The minister can counter that and say, look, if you're tax registered and you're tax compliant, then we can try and help out your situation. But if you're not, then something is wrong. So it's something that goes hand in hand. But I think the demands for Forex will outweigh what we're currently supplying the market. I think once oil and gas continues to do well, I think there will be earnings in terms of in terms of US dollars and various other currencies. But I think there will be always continue to be a high demand for Forex.
Well, I would like to thank you, Mr. Seenath, for joining me. The time just completely flew by. We are at 6:29 right now, so I'll ask for your closing thoughts on the 2024 national budget.
Yeah, again, like I said, the minister, he put his plan into place 8 years now running, and it shows that from his fiscal measures, not introducing much more than he did. He's relying on the measures that he's put in place over the years. Whether those measures you're seeing fruition through in terms of revenue generation is hard to tell. But I think definitely from his projections in revenue, being with the non-oil sector being 35 plus billion, it suggests that there's a fair level of diversification that's happening in the economy, where other sectors are stepping up and taking the place of the oil sector. So I definitely think that the minister will try to be prudent over the next year, and if oil prices remain high, then there will be a windfall in terms of revenue generation, which he will probably use in other areas. But I think the minister is just being prudent and bearing in mind that in the next 2 years there will be a general election. So he's factored that into his entire presentation.
Well, thank you so much again. We have been chatting with Mr. Arun Seenath, council member at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us, helping us understand this fiscal package. And of course, we can expect many, many more discussions, forums, post-budget analyses coming up over the next few days. So do have a good evening, sir, and thank you again for joining us.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.
And that brings us to the end of our post-budget analysis. Of course, the financial package delivered this afternoon by Finance Minister Colm Imbert.